first tip is to make sure that you're always in a ready position. So we often see in things like movies and TV and games that people are doing things like pulling back with their weapon and then striking in. Whereas what you should do is actually start in some sort of ready position so you can attack or defend in almost an instant. If you aren't, then therefore you're just giving the opponent an opportunity to react, an opportunity to do something to prepare in advance of whatever action you're going to do. Whether it was something like a cut or a thrust or some sort of parry you were going to deliver, they can see that you're going to do that, and then they'll be able to do something to counter that and just simply nullify anything you try. So hence, if you actually start behind or even just in front with some weapons, in a position where you are ready and can act within a very short amount of time, then that's going to help you a lot. The second tip is to move as you attack or defend. Yes, you can indeed do things like parries, strikes, you can do thrusts, cuts, all sorts of things while standing still, but in nearly all cases it's best to move in some direction, whether you're advancing forwards towards your opponent, whether you're retreating back away from them, or even if you actually move to the side to get around their defense for something like a parry to then riposte from an unusual angle, or even just attacking straight from a strange angle that will help make their defense weaker against you while they're still facing where you used to be. And that, just in moving around alone as you're doing the fighting, will actually help you fight a lot better. For the third tip, remember to stay upright. Might sound strange, but just by having good positioning of your feet and making sure that you remain upright at all times, it means that you have a better balance and position. This means that you can attack and defend quicker. It means you'll be more stable, so you're harder to grapple around and throw to the floor. And it also means that other actions that people try against you, such as disarming a weapon from you, will be more difficult. It also means that you don't give unusual targets. If, for example, you're trying to cut at a leg, if you just lunged out with your feet and your legs and then did a cut at them, you're not as likely to present your head as an obvious target as if you actually bend forward as you're doing that attack. If you bend forward, you will give your head as an easily struck target. So hence, the longer that you can stay upright and firm on your footing, the longer that you can fight well. For the fourth tip, whenever you're doing some kind of attack, whether it's a cut or a thrust with any kind of weapon, you should always use the shortest distance to your target. It's the same as in things like boxing. You don't see people throwing haymakers and swinging their fists all the way around. You see them doing things like jabs and things like that. The reason is you've got that quickest distance from one area where you're starting to the end area where you've struck something. The same applies to swords. You'd have the shortest distance between where you're ready and where you've landed your cut, as opposed to moving around like you're some sort of action figure and just doing this really roundabout kind of moving, which actually makes you slower and again more predictable, and you won't even hit that much harder at all. If you're actually doing the attacks quickly, that speed will give inertia and more force into doing things like cuts and thrusts, so you don't even need to worry about that anymore. For the fifth tip, when it comes to weapon fighting, focus on the opponent and not the weapon. It's something I've seen far too much in sparring, where someone's maybe got a sword, but it could be something like a poleaxe, spear, mace, it can be anything, and these two people are fighting with each other. A beginner often focuses on the weapon rather than the person holding it. So they end up doing almost sort of movie fight scene style stuff, like trying to smash a sword out of the way, but they're not doing it so they can maybe take the threat out of the way and then cut again to hit the person. It's just their one and only goal. I want to hit that weapon. And then nothing happens because, and I've even said it to beginners when they're fighting me, they've tried to hit my sword, I've just recovered again, and I've gone, guess what? My sword doesn't bleed. Hit me. Because that's what you need to be doing. Yes, of course you need to always worry about whatever weapon is there that acts as a threat. Maybe its point is towards your face, maybe they're prepared in a position where they're going to attack or defend against you, but your end goal should of course be that you hit the person holding the weapon, not just hit the weapon itself. For the 6th tip, fight against more than one person. That doesn't necessarily mean simultaneously, I just mean try different opponents. I have seen some instances where people are quite new, because what they've been doing is maybe they have been practicing at home, maybe they've been practicing in some club environment, wherever they've been, but they've always been practicing against the same other person. It might be people who are perhaps in some sort of relationship with each other, it might be people who've just lived locally to other people and have just found it convenient to practice against one particular person all the time. However, what happens is they get very good at fighting each other, they get used to each other's tricks and tactics, their height, their strength, their speed, all of those little factors are gauged down and they perfectly understand what that person's going to do and adapt to it. But the problem is, it doesn't help with general fighting. They get so used to fighting that one person that whenever anyone throws a spanner in the works by actually being a different height, a different weight, or having a different attitude to fighting, it completely throws their idea of fighting out of the window. And that's one of the reasons why actually it's also good if you're doing certain techniques by certain treatises or certain masters or whatever styles you're engaged in. It helps to actually fight against people who don't do that. People who might well be from different disciplines, for example. Because that means that with greater variety of opponents fought, the more you'll be able to understand general fighting to adapt to everyone and anyone that you're against, as opposed to just being focused against one particular style or method of fighting. Tip number 7, be spontaneous. Quite simply, if you are used to doing things like keeping your distance, try closing in. If you're used to doing things like carving a lot at the hands or areas like that, try going for the head. Or do all kinds of things like that. Try moving to try a different side. If, for example, you always fight from your dominant side, try fighting from your non-dominant side. Things like that. It's good practice because it improves your repertoire, and in an actual sort of dueling or sparring or some sort of competition or, God forbid, a real fight, it helps not to have your opponent predict you by you constantly doing the same things over and over. Instead, doing things that take them by surprise, and that will always give you the best advantage. Tip number 8, relax. It might sound weird, and for once the movies and television are actually right, when you've got those people who look so casual and like it's just so instinctive and natural to just be fighting so effectively. It's actually because when you are relaxed and when you're just being calm and patient and just doing what you need to do, it's actually going to make you fight a lot better than if you're really tense and if you're quite stressed or frightened or even nervous. If you are, for example, having a bit of a death grip on your weapon, you're going to end up with very sore hands and arms. You're going to tire yourself out before you've even swung your weapon. If you're doing things like being too reactionary, you're going to end up too defensive and not fight properly. All sorts of reasons like that. If you're relaxed and you're focused, it's going to come out good for you. Number 9, condition yourself. If you're able to do things like hold high guards with sabres, or do strenuous cuts from above with things like a two-handed sword, or whatever weapon you're using, if you do the more, perhaps might feel strenuous or awkward types of manoeuvres, and actually get used to it, and also try sparring for a lot longer than you might normally be comfortable with, as long as of course you're not ending up injured or anything like that, then that's going to help you become better as a fighter, being able to fight for longer, being able to do the more strenuous types of techniques and moves, just generally being faster and stronger as well as a benefit, and this will always make you better as a swordsman. And for number 10, our final one, is simply to try training more. Yes, of course, in specific instances of competitions or maybe some occasional sparring, if you're doing the things I mentioned before, it's going to help. but just frankly practicing more is always going to be useful. If you're getting used to techniques, if you're getting used to all the varieties of opponents, doing all of those things and practicing a lot more often, just like professionals do, trying their trade for longer rather than just occasionally doing something as a hobby, it makes them superior at the craft. So likewise, if you're able to do more of this sort of training, then it's going to make you much better than your opponents. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like, feel free to subscribe for more information, perhaps a bit more in-depth detail. And of course, I shall see you in the next video. Goodbye.